We often take simple things for granted: fresh, clean food, the air we breathe, clean running water, and hope. We even take tomorrow for granted. All over the continent of Africa, people in villages, even some urban areas, cannot depend on the water being clean or even available. Couple this with unsanitary living conditions and a disease that is spreading across the planet like a living blanket of death, and you have a continent on the brink of disaster. HIV/AIDS has taken hold of our collective breaths and seems to be keeping a grip that will not be released anytime soon. Here in Cameroon, the reported incidences of the disease have dropped off in such a way that some would believe the disease to be coming under an unstable control. However, when we ventured out into various provinces throughout Cameroon, we found that many times the victims simply never reported or, surprisingly, refuse to accept that they have contracted HIV/AIDS or that it even exists.
Oh yes, we are ready. Oh yes, we are ready.
My name is Cynthia Henderson. I teach acting at Ithaca College in upstate New York. In collaboration with my colleague, Imelda Samba of the University of Yaoundé 1, we set out to use theater as a method in which to create HIV/AIDS awareness. We are hoping to spread information about HIV/AIDS by planting our own virus of information. Our hope is that theater, like the tradition of storytelling, will teach and demystify the disease. We have chosen to travel and work in villages because it is in villages that most of the information about HIV/AIDS gets lost. In most rural areas, there is no electricity. Even if there is electricity in a few places of businesses, most families have no access to television or radio, which is now how much of the information is delivered. In rural areas, information is delivered by word of mouth. Since theater and storytelling are popular forms of entertainment in most African countries, we decided to use them to educate and spread the truth about HIV/AIDS. Ndop is a semi-rural town found in the Bamenda region and is located 366 kilometers northwest of Yaoundé. It is an English-speaking region with a temperature which is warmer than most parts of the Northwest. When we arrived in Ndop, it was already dark. However, the participants were still waiting for us. Even though we were about 3 hours behind schedule, one simply cannot rush Cameroonian public transportation. Our late arrival proved to set up our hours. We started early and stayed late into every evening of the workshop. The walk back to our host's home was dark and often dusty. Our workshop took place on the premises of the social welfare offices. We were afforded the liberty to work in the main hall as well as the building's gated courtyard. We spent most of our time working in the courtyard because the light was better and we had more space to move about in. The workshop participants were gathered by AWICO, Association of Women's Information and Coordination Offices. Contrary to the organization's name, its members are both men and women. WICO is a self-help group. In addition to their work with HIV/AIDS infected and affected persons, they carry out animal husbandry, grow corn, rice, and other economic crops.
When I come from Bangla, It's a distance of about 50 kilometers. It took me about 4 hours. Yes.
Many participants were not from Ndop. One of the participants actually walked for about 6 hours in order to attend the workshop. The varying distances traveled proved to be a good thing, in that what we trained would go beyond the village into other towns and villages.
What I expect from this workshop is to gather more information about the prevention of HIV/AIDS.
Some participants were specifically sent by their communities to bring back what they learned. This was one of our goals with this project. We wanted the work to go out and continue long after we had left. The night we arrived, we didn't stop to eat or even have a drink of water. Our first order of business was to get to know each other, establish a sense of safe space, and an effective way of working.
I'm an HIV positive. I always live in drugs. Yes, I know that AIDS is existing.
Is shaking, okay, to ya. Let's is shaking, okay, to ya. Is shaking, okay, to ya.
It is a Cameroonian custom to always address an elder by Mr., Mrs., or some other title. It was decided that in order for us to work as equals, we should use workshop names.
My middle name is Ambo. So I would like you to call me Ambitious Imelda. I would like to for the workshop, maybe they call me Tolerant Tabali.
Then I would like that they take the last name S, call me Serious.
Serious, yes.
We all used names which were a reflection of how we saw ourselves and the image we would like to project.
But I will use a C from my name, and I will be called Confident Cynthia.
The cameraman called himself Invisible. Cameroonians tend to be highly exercise conscious, so getting the participants motivated to do their morning warm-ups proved to be very easy. The warm-ups were geared towards controlled breathing, clear projection of the voice, and a general limbering of the body. All of our meals were eaten where we worked. Though we would often attempt to guide our cook away from the heavy starch, greasy diets common to the area to a more nutritious diet, we more often than not ate starch, some meat, and vegetables swimming in oil. Food also did not always arrive on time, and clean drinking water was not always available. In order to be able to create an effective play that would both speak the truth about HIV/AIDS as well as expose the various myths that surround the disease, we had to find out what was being said about the disease.
Then, after some time, the woman, it changed color. The big black woman, like me so, he started get some kind of yellow spots for his skin, where, you know the hot, you know the itch.
Well, I don't really believe because I've never had any fruitful lecture on AIDS. I was in Nigeria last month and I was arguing about with people, but we never ended with some fruitful argument. Because I left, hadn't enough time to argue with them. But I will be happy to meet you if you can put me through to believe that AIDS really existing.
Then we have seen so many cases, so I've been seeing it, so I'm not doubting if I see it, a person having it, I will not doubt.
It was interesting to note that many of the participants had their own misconceptions about how the virus spread from one person to the other.
I don't know how you should me explain what you mean say be safe, be safe.
Safe sex is a term that people came up with about the use of condoms, female condoms and male condoms.
No, nobody is free from this HIV/AIDS. Me sitting here like this, I'm not sure I'm free because I'm not even going for the test. I'm afraid to go for the test.
How is it possible for somebody to be having sex, something which is not pleasurable? Are you fighting? Is it a war that is going to provoke a wound in order to spread the disease? So they're trying to say that it cannot be possible through that means.
I want to know whether AIDS can be transmitted through using condoms.
Through our group discussions, we began to form an overview of what we needed to create and perform for the people of Ndop and other surrounding villages. Since most of our information on HIV/AIDS was part research, part emotional, and part common sense, we obtained the assistance of Dr. Gregory Alundo.
Use a condom properly. It's a 0% chance of having HIV through using a condom. 0.
Dr. Alundo returned to Ndop in order to work at the local hospital after studying medicine in the University Teaching Hospital in Yaoundé.
It doesn't suffice for a virus to touch on a man's body for him to become infected. You have to, that is something, if you put a virus on healthy skin, it's possible that you will not get infected.
He took the name Grateful, though I am sure it is the village of Ndop and the workshop participants who are grateful.
Status. First, to accept that the disease exists is one thing. To accept that I have it is another thing. Okay. And the truth is, here people just don't accept yet.
He gave 2 talks during the 4-day workshop and worked with us on the various myths and misunderstandings associated with HIV/AIDS. He also took time to do a couple of question and answer sessions with the eager and concerned participants. Many had concerns for relatives and friends that they suspected were HIV/AIDS positive, but would not go for testing.
Why is it that there's been so much talk about HIV/AIDS in Cameroon and people continue to be infected?
The reason, though, for my desire to do this project on HIV/AIDS as opposed to, say, malaria, is because there's so many misconceptions amongst the African community about HIV/AIDS, so many superstitions that surround it, so many myths that surround it, so many cultural traditions that continue the spread of this disease.
It's very, very painful, extremely painful really, to have a relative of yours or a brother, a sister, or a friend, and you watch him go through the agony and end up dying. So I just thought that maybe through theater we'll be able to reach out to a large number of people and educate them on the HIV/AIDS problem.
Fever every day. Fever every day. Oh, well, but it's good for me to go and check myself, eh?
Look, understand me, please, eh? If, this AIDS issue, eh?
I would say that our target audiences were villagers, particularly adults. The reason for this is because most other agencies target youth and college students. The villagers and adults who shape the earlier perceptions and create the rules get lost in the attempt to reach the younger crowd. These older persons, we have discovered, are often the people who take the information the young people bring home and throw it out as immoral, simply calling the disease a myth or a government plot to siphon more money into the pockets of the wealthy. The older, more traditional groups here in Africa are important to the fight against HIV/AIDS because their opinions are respected in the villages. If they can understand that the disease is very real, then they may not dismiss the information that their young people bring home. If we can get them on board with the realities of the disease, get them interested in the importance of testing, proper nutrition, responsible sexual activities, as well as abstinence, then we will have come a long way towards stemming the tide of the spread of HIV/AIDS in this country and in others. To invite people to the performance, the participants created posters and placed them on the gates of the workshop location. The posters also served to let passers-by know what we were doing. There was often a small crowd gathered outside the gate to watch our rehearsals.
Everything will be okay. It's over. I am AIDS.
Sorry, what have you just said?
That I love you so much. You are so dear to me.
The other posters were placed in the market squares a few hours before we arrived to let marketers know that a performance was coming that day. The marketplace is the center of daily activities in most Cameroonian communities. It is here that much news is exchanged. It is a place for social calls as well as business exchanges. So it was natural that we would go to this hub of activity in order to gather an audience for our performances. The first performance was, of course, the one the participants were most nervous about. We had only been working for about a day and a half. And this time we had broken down the goals of the workshop, shared stories of past experiences with both HIV/AIDS as a reality and a possibility.
Here we go,
Young and old men, full bosom.
The participants had also just put together their thoughts in the form of poems and monologues, which they had not yet committed to memory.
we will get our help.
The improvised scenes were still not fully blocked for outdoor theater in the round. They were going into their very first show, still on book for much of the play we had created and very determined.
Has killed many of our kinsmen. People dying of AIDS. People say AIDS does not exist.
My blood, it's wrong. If you tell me something yesterday for social money, when you go to even he said some things that will come for me.
Not me. I been think about you.
And what you happen now?
Oh, Baba, I've been having fever all along. I've been running stomach for 3 months.
I don't fool you. I take my 50,000, take my goat, and it don't go, I go die. Amen.
Our first audience was rather unpredictable. As we paraded through the marketplace, singing songs and waving signs to let the audience know what we were doing, we could feel that this audience was going to be a mix of those truly interested in the message and those who were simply interested in the prospect of free condoms. They were becoming unruly before we had even reached a performance area that one of the participants had earlier scouted out. This was going to be a test of focus for the participants. We had a large crowd of men and women for each performance. However, on this first performance, we were unprepared for the unruly youths that were attracted by the lure of plain talk about sex and HIV/AIDS.
You see the female condom?
Look up! You look up for them! The day when they expire, they there. That way, Mr. John don't weak. No use them again. That way, Mr. John don't go down. You cool them now.
Condom, they transmit AIDS. If only you don't use them correctly. And if it dates for expire, don't pass.
Despite the pushing of the crowd and some overeager spectators who wanted to ask questions and receive free condoms, the first performance went well for our first-time actors.
I was very surprised. I think the actors handled themselves incredibly well considering the wildness of the crowd. They seemed to enjoy it because they heard a lot of the jokes, they got a lot of the message, and then afterwards there were actually some very good questions.
It means a man picking in that woman in order to go for a woman in belly. That means we would never was we don't correct because we don't.
There were, of course, numerous minor difficulties as we went into surrounding villages. Transportation costs had to be negotiated in each village, both arriving and departing. Each driver we encountered had a different fare for the same distances. They also had varying policies about how they would transport passengers. For instance, one taxi driver would only take 3 passengers in the back and 2 in the front, whereas another driver would insist on squeezing 5 in the back and 3 in the front. Or if we did not want to travel under such unsafe conditions, we had to pay for the other non-existent seats regardless.
Boni Coco, Boni Wayo, Bona Sherry, Boni Pepe, Boni Coco, Boni Wayo, Bona Sherry, Boni Pepe, Boni Coco, Boni Wayo, Bona Sherry, Boni Pepe, Mama Zambone.
He was trying to make a 10 and then take us back.
Zimbete kume mama, mama zimbete kume ananga motome ai mama zimbete kume mama.
I don't know how you chose Cynthia. We are blessed.
Being unfamiliar with the idea of checking with someone before I talked to another group, I made a few mistakes while doing this project. We were working with the group Awiko. Their neighbor organization, LAC, did much of the same work, except that this group had some government assistance.
I'm so happy. I don't know how I'm so happy. I thank you very much.
As I was having a conversation with one of the organizers of this group, she mentioned that she was currently very concerned about a group of orphans. I asked her if I could meet and spend a little time with the children, and she readily agreed. The following day, during a break in the workshop, I took off to buy food and other necessities for the children before I visited. When I met the children, they seemed shy to have a strange woman coming into their home. I suppose I would be also, especially if she were accompanied by a camera and other strangers. My partner, Imelda, came along when I visited the children. There are 5 siblings, the eldest being 14, and their father had died of AIDS a few years ago, and their mother had died of HIV/AIDS complications 2 months ago. These children had an uncle who could not take them in because of the number of children he was already providing for. The home was tidy for a group of children, but it was obviously lacking in basic necessities. The food storage area had vegetables rotting in corners and looked to be a haven for whatever small creatures chose to live there. The kitchen consisted of a small fire in the front yard. The children were managing to fend for themselves as well as stay in school. I found their determination to stay together both moving and humbling. I also felt helpless in the face of such poverty. How could a couple of boxes of food and toiletries be of help when they needed so much? I never really cared if I were wealthy. However, today, I wished I were a billionaire.
Dunia sumbene, dunia masumala. Ya ye, dunia masumala. Dunia sumbene, dunia masumala. Ya ye, dunia masumala. Masumala, dunia masumala, dunia masumala. Ya ye, dunia masumala. Naisha masumala. Dunia masumala, dunia masumala. Ya ye, dunia masumala, dunia sumbene.
It was felt that I should observe proper protocols since I was there to work with WICO. Imelda explained that my visit was not connected to the workshop and that the money I used was not project money, but my own to spend as I privately saw fit. The resentment, however, remained. There is a strong sense of possessiveness when it comes to visitors. However, when you look at it from the point of view of poverty, it is somewhat understandable. WICO would have loved assistance to these orphans in their Ndop area to have come through them and not through another organization. However, as a visitor, it is difficult to want to help when you know that what you have will not be enough for everyone that needs it, and that there will be resentment from those who do not receive what little you have to give. It is frustrating on both ends.
In one family, sister, in one family, we shall join the whole world.
In one family, brothers, in one family, we shall join the whole world.
In one unity.
For every misunderstanding, breach of protocol, unruly spectator, or dust-filled sneeze, there were also bright ideas, encouragement to try something new, thoughtful questions asked and answered, and energy to share, laughter, excitement, and determination among the participants to keep the work alive after the facilitators had left.
We shall join the whole world.
In one corporation, in one corporation, all us in one corporation, we shall change the whole world.
As we wrapped up the last performance, settled all bills, and gave out certificates of participation, it was time for me, Imelda, Mercy, our assistant, and Lucian to leave.
Kumialo mi bake mi e, kumialo mi bake mi o, kumialo mi bake mi e, mama, abijabili dio, mama, kumialo mi bake mi e, kumialo mi bake mi o.
The workshop participants, however, had a surprise for the two foreigners, myself and Lucian, or Invisible the cameraman, as he was also known. They presented us with gifts and African names.
That your name is Mo.
I was named Nchufwa, which means Mother of Kings, and Lucian was named Mo, which means special, elite. After 4 exhausting and encouraging days, we said goodbye and hoped that our efforts had fallen onto fertile soil and would spread far beyond the dusty roads of Indap.
Bala,